So, where did the interest in archaeology and artefacts in particular start for you?
Well, it started on a very beautiful summer's morning when I was 16, driving by pony and trap from Marlborough to Avebury to go and check that out and see what it was all about. And everything about it was magical, of course. And we trapped along a rather big main road. First of all, we passed Salisbury Hill, which is unbelievable. This giant pyramid rising out of virtually flat. And it's a flat landscape, really.
Almost, yeah.
David Inshaw is obsessed by Salisbury Hill, not surprisingly, and paints it again and again. And it is the most extraordinary place. So that was, if that wasn't enough, we trapped on, and we get to Avebury, and it's so beautiful, so breathtaking, so empty then actually, and we walked about amongst the barrows and the curving hills and things, and the stones, and then you get to the more settled stones, and everything was marvellous about it. And then we found this little museum. I think it was called Mr. Somebody's Curiosities or something. It had an odd name. I mean, everything was odd about that. And we went in, and the first thing that I saw was a tiny little thumb pot. Because I didn't know it was a thumb pot then, but it was a tiny little handmade pot amongst slightly bigger pots, which were beaker pots. And I was, it knocked me sideways actually. I was completely entranced by this little handmade piece. It was so beautiful, and it was so moving, and so in beaker pots, and made an enormous impact. But I think the interesting thing too about this was that I didn't then want to make one. I had no desire to make one. I simply wanted to look at it and feel the joy of it. Actually, very much the feeling when you look at great art, and you go to museums and galleries and you look at great art, and your whole heart and your heart bursts actually when you see something marvellous. And that was that moment. So it was a marvellous day, and we tracked back, and that was the end of that. And then a bit later, I went to art school, and I knew that I wanted to be a fine art artist. I wanted to paint, I wanted to printmake, and all these things I did. So I would spend in art school first, my provincial art school, which was the thing to do, the right way we used to do things then, and it probably still is. And I studied painting, sculpture, printmaking, drawing, all those things, and set out to be an artist, which I did. I had 2 daughters on the way, which is absolutely lovely, beautiful daughters, sitting here. And eventually, years later, ended up in Tidpit, which is where is Tidpit? It's just outside Martin, Village Martin. Anyway, it's local to here. And bought a rundown, well, derelict practically, farmhouse with lots of outbuildings. And one of them was a 2-storey barn, which was huge and obviously the most perfect studio you could possibly have. Which it was. And so I set up my print studio down in the ground floor and my painting studio above. And all went swimmingly-ish. Anyway, what I have to say about being an artist is that when you're an artist, it's either feast or famine. There's no in between. So the famine bits are rather bad. And you never know when the feast is going to happen, which is obviously when you sell a piece of work. And always going reasonably well, but actually 1984 was a year, sort of rings a bell, doesn't it, 1984? Catastrophic year predicted by what's his name. And it was for us, and it was famine like you've never known famine. At that moment, 3 brilliantly talented young designers came to live. They rented a barn at Oldstock Manor to begin their business. And if I say brilliantly brilliant, this is one of their wonderful works. The best ever, actually. Should be flooding the V&A with their stuff. Anyway, God, I'm losing track of them.
Who are they? Say who they are.
There's one of them sitting there. So Barnett store, who is the powerhouse behind the designs, and then her two, and they were all at Camberwell, I think, Camberwell Art School together, and the two boys, Jimmy Doherty and Martin Simcock, and I think Martin was the business side, and Jimmy was the person who translated the patterns from small to big and all things like that. Anyway, they had a flood in the cottage that they'd rented, and suddenly they got nowhere to be, and so my great friends, Diana de Vere Cole and Tristan Cole, said to them, well, I know somewhere you can go to Trish, and you can go and rent somewhere. So up they turned, these three bedraggled, pathetic designers, and I rented them my room and my two daughters' bedrooms. And didn't tell the daughters. But anyway. And it was fantastic because I had rent coming in, but it was only for 3 weeks. So, but it was rent, and it was sort of saving our lives for 3 weeks. But actually they stayed for 3 years. We just never went home. So we lived together, the four of us, for 3 years, having the best possible time. Endless parties, huge parties in the long barn that was part of the farm, which became sort of ridiculously extravagant and famous. And we worked very hard, actually. We all worked very hard, because we were very creatively mad. And it was like being back at art school. So life had suddenly seemed to end, and all doors seemed to have closed on me. But they just flew open again. And it was so much better than before. It was almost back at art school, getting on. And then I went to spend a weekend with some great friends, Joanna Still, wonderful potter, and Tim Harrison, amazing sculptor. We had a lovely weekend, and eventually Joanna said she would take me into the studio and show me how to make a coil pot. And we did that. I didn't terribly want to do it, actually, but one has to be polite. So I went in, and it was an epiphany, actually. It was absolutely amazing. She rolled out these worms of clay. I had no idea what a coil pot was, actually. And she started building it. And then she said, now you have a go. And so I started the coiling and pinching. And it was magic. It was lovely. I loved it. It was a lovely, rhythmic, nice, sort of deeply fundamental thing to do. Pinching clay and forming a pot. And it got bigger and bigger. It started on a very small base, actually, it had started. And it just kept going out, because when you pinch clay, when you make a coil pot, as you pinch it just keeps growing. So eventually you have to learn how to bring it in. And that's quite difficult, but you do. However, I already had a, what's it called, a sort of format because I'd been to Avery. So in my mind was the beaker pots. Anyway, I didn't know then, but so I made a pot. I finished the pot with Jana, and I decorated it with patterns, and she gave me raw oxides, which is what she used to make the colours. And I didn't know what you did on a pot. I hadn't a clue, really. But I thought maybe patterns. So I painted a leek, and I abstracted the patterns from the leek pot. And that pot is actually in the, what are we calling it? The thing.
Wessex Gallery Showcase, that thing.
Installation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wessex Gallery, yes, exactly.
Do you remember?
And it's in the case. Anyway, it's a major. And I went home and sort of thinking, well, that was fun. Now I get back to what I really do. And somehow I didn't stop the car. The car drove on to Fordingbridge, where there was a pottery supplies. And I bought some clay, and I brought it back, and I thought, well, I'll bring it up to the studio, because if I want to do that again, it'd be fun. And of course I couldn't wait to open the bag of clay, and I couldn't wait to start. So I started, and that was it. It was happening. And everything kept going wrong, because actually if you know absolutely nothing about something terribly difficult that you take on, it all goes dreadfully wrong. So the first thing, I made lots of small bowls based on the thumb pod, and it was quite, I think it was coming up to Christmas actually, and I thought lovely presents for friends, family and everybody. And Joanna did, at that time, she did once firing, so she didn't biscuit fire, paint and glaze and do 2 different firings. She did the whole thing in one, which was make it very quick, but actually terribly dangerous really, and she doesn't do that now. But I was doing what she'd shown me, so I made all these lovely little, I spent ages making these lovely little sort of bowls and cups and things, and decorated them with slips. And in the morning when I went up to the studio, I couldn't find them. They'd gone, they'd vanished. And when I looked carefully on the big bench where I'd left them, there were about a dozen or so completely flat. Because they were I'd put a bit too much water on the slip, and they were all sort of no more. Start again. So lots of things went wrong. I did actually go and visit Sandy Brown and talk to her about it, because she was like me. She started making pots simply because she was actually a beautician with Helen Rubinstein, and she went out with Rubinstein to Japan. And when she was there, she went to the villages where the potteries, and she said, I touched clay, and that was it. And so I thought, God, really, it's just like me. And so I thought, I'll go and ask her how she coped to not knowing anything. And I rang Joanna saying, look, this has happened, and it's all gone wrong, and it's all exploded, and nothing's working. And Joanna quite rightly said, go and get some books and read them. And I did, but I couldn't read the books because actually I didn't know anything about the subject, so I couldn't read very incredibly complicated technical manuals without reading it all in language I couldn't understand and everything. Actually, it was brilliant that Joanna didn't interfere with my disabled learning capacity, because it meant that I did gradually, feebly crawl my way into finding my own way of doing it. So it was the best possible teaching of all. It was showing me how to do it, that I was going to like it, and then hands off. Anyway, I go down to Devon to talk to Sandy, who's absolutely lovely. And I said, well, I bought all these books, and I simply can't understand them, I can't read them. And Sandy said, burn the books. Books, what? But I knew what she meant, because I didn't burn them. But she said, follow your heart, that's it. So I went back, and that's what I did.